Hey guys, tonight we're bundling up in scratchy wool, stuffing straw into sandals, and cramming ourselves into a smoky cottage where the walls whisper with wind and the fire never quite reaches your feet. You're in a medieval village now, and winter is settling in like an unwelcome in-law. The air is crisp enough to sting your nose, and the sky's been stuck in gloomy grey for weeks. Your breath fogs in the kitchen, even though it's technically the warmest part of the house, and the chickens are starting to refuse to lay eggs, as if even they know things are about to get grim. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening somewhere cold right now, let me know your local time and where you're tuning in from. I want to picture you bundled up with us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the edge of the frostbitten field, your boots stiff with yesterday's mud frozen into rock. The sun barely breaks over the horizon by the time your chores begin. It's late autumn, just before true winter sets in, and already the mornings are so cold they make your teeth ache. The livestock pens are slick with icy slush, and the cow's breath comes in thick white plumes. You rub your hands together furiously and nudge a sleepy pig out of your way. She grumbles, unimpressed. You would grumble too if your blanket was just some hay in a wooden shed. Back inside, the hearth has died down to a faint glow. Someone forgot to stoke it last night, or maybe the wind just bullied it into submission. Either way, the cottage is bitterly cold. Your breath hangs in the air as you light a scrap of dry moss to get the fire going again. You'd think in a world without central heating, people would invent something smarter than just keep feeding it wood. But no, this is the best you've got. Around this time, everyone in the village starts shifting into cold weather mode. Morning chores are done faster or not at all. Tools are patched up and tucked away. That broken ladder you've ignored all summer? Now it matters, because it might be the only way to clear snow off the roof before it collapses under the weight. Even the sounds change. Birds grow quiet. The clack of hooves on frozen ground echoes differently, and there's a communal silence, half dread, half calm, that spreads through the village as days shorten. Winter's not just coming, it's setting up camp. You carry a bundle of kindling into the neighbour's hut. It's old Agnes's place. She's been sick for weeks and the thatch on her roof looks like it's auditioning for a collapse. You add a few twigs to her fire, fluff her ragged blanket, and she nods at you from under 6 layers of cloth. Your hands are like corpse fingers, she rasps, which is basically medieval for thank you. This is what survival looks like. Neighbour by neighbour, spark by spark. You help each other now because by midwinter, the world will shrink to the size of a single room, and the people in it are all that stand between you and the cold's quiet grip. By the time you return home, the sun is already retreating. A goose honks somewhere in protest as it's herded into a pen. Smoke snakes up from every chimney, grey against the flat white sky. The village smells like wet wool, turnips, and wood smoke, a scent that will cling to your skin until spring. Historians still argue whether early medieval communities in colder climates truly prepared for winter systematically, or simply reacted to it in panic year after year. Some scholars insist stockpiling grain and insulating huts was a coordinated effort. Others argue that survival was mostly luck, livestock proximity, and sheer stubbornness. Based on how chaotic today's preparations have been, you're leaning toward the second theory. Still, you manage to snatch a few comforts before the night deepens. You set aside a dried apple for later, you check your shoes for holes, and when the fire finally catches, you feel that first gentle wave of heat kiss your frozen knees. It's fleeting but sweet, like someone brushing your cheek with warm bread. A fringe custom from a nearby village comes to mind, tying bundles of evergreen to the rafters to trap warmth and keep out spirits of the cold. Is it superstitious nonsense? Maybe, but the smell of pine is nice, and any edge against the frost feels worth the effort. Outside, the wind picks up. Snow flurries begin to dance in the air, soft and slow like someone shaking powdered sugar over the hills. You step out one last time to check the door latch. The stars are shy tonight, peeking out in brief glimmers, and the whole world seems to hold its breath. You take it in, this quiet pause, this ancient rhythm of survival, then return inside to prepare for the long night ahead. The night deepens, and so does the chill. You sit by the hearth, trying to feel something through your patched-up tunic and fraying wool trousers. But let's be honest, medieval layering is less about comfort and more about strategic suffering. There's no Gore-Tex, no thermal underwear, just scratchy, homespun fabric that somehow holds in every unpleasant itch but none of your body heat. Getting ready for bed in winter isn't so much a routine as it is a negotiation with your own dignity. First comes the linen shift. That's your base layer, stained, probably smells like onions and has been passed down at least twice. Over that goes your wool undertunic, heavier and stiffer than you remembered. You stuff some dry straw between it and your body, a peasant's version of insulation. Yes, it pokes. No, you don't complain. Then there's the overtunic, and possibly a cloak if you're lucky, or if you swiped one from your cousin during last year's festival and no one noticed. Socks. If you still have a matched pair, congratulations. They're repurposed scraps stitched together by someone with failing eyesight and arthritic fingers. And shoes? Haha. No, you're going to bed. If your feet aren't already wrapped in cloth, you'll improvise with yesterday's shirt sleeves tied around your ankles. Elegant? Not even a little. But in a cottage where frost creeps in like a silent thief, dignity is the first thing to freeze. Now for the hat. Oh yes, you're sleeping in a hat. A woolen cap that may or may not be half felted and likely smells faintly of sheep. If you're noble-born, this would be a velvet nightcap with decorative embroidery. But you are not noble-born. You're just trying to keep your ears from falling off in your sleep. Here's the thing, layering wasn't just about warmth, it was about survival. Medieval people knew that once the cold got inside you, bone deep, it didn't leave easily. So they bundled. Not stylishly, not gracefully, but obsessively. Every inch covered, every layer trapping just enough body heat to fool the night into thinking you might actually win. And speaking of winning, here's a quirky little fact. In some remote Alpine villages, people believe that placing iron scissors under your pillow would ward off cold demons that try to freeze your soul during sleep. You don't have scissors, but you do have a rusty spoon. Close enough. As you curl up under your blanket, which is really just a rough wool rectangle that smells like damp hay, you start performing the medieval bedtime ritual, shuffling, curling, wrapping, unwrapping, muttering curses, and finally forming yourself into a tight ball with your knees somewhere near your chin. The blanket doesn't quite cover your feet and shoulders at the same time, so you have to pick one. Tonight, you choose shoulders. Your toes will understand. Historians still debate how much layering peasants could realistically afford. Some argue that multiple layers were a luxury limited to wealthier farmers, while others point out that even the poorest families found ways to reuse old cloth, spinning and patching and repatching, until garments resembled patchwork battle armour. Judging by your current outfit, part tunic, part sack, part curtain, you believe the latter. And let's not forget that medieval fashion wasn't just regional, it was seasonal. In northern climates, extra long sleeves doubled as makeshift mittens. In coastal villages, fishermen wore sealskin boots stuffed with moss. In mountainous regions, children were wrapped in multiple shifts and slept near the oven, if the house even had one. But no matter where you lived, winter sleepwear was the same. Everything you owned, all at once. And if you were especially unlucky, you'd have to share that blanket with someone else. Possibly 3 or 4 someone else's. There's a reason families crammed into a single bed: body heat. Humans, it turns out, are basically ambulatory space heaters. So you pile in together, like unwashed sardines, hoping no one rolls over too aggressively. Elbows in ribs are common. Accidental kicks? Frequent. Snores? Oh, the snores. You lie still trying to ignore the snorting noises from your uncle, the twitching foot of your cousin pressed against your thigh, and the unmistakable smell of fermented cabbage seeping through someone's breath. Above you the rafters creak, the thatch groans as wind pushes at it from all sides. Somewhere in the walls a mouse scurries, probably nesting inside someone's discarded shoe. You wonder if the mouse is warmer than you. There's an odd comfort in this shared discomfort. Everyone around you is just as cold, just as tired, just as miserable, and still, somehow, it feels okay, maybe even cozy, in a deeply delusional way. After all, it's not like you've known anything else. This is winter, this is life, and for now, you're dressed to survive it. You adjust your hat one last time, pull the blanket tight, and try to drift into whatever sleep this night will allow. It's sometime past midnight, though you don't know exactly when. There are no clocks here, just the creak of the rafters, the occasional snore from your cousin, and the unmistakable sensation of a goat's hoof pressing against your back. Yes, that's right. You're not just sleeping with your family, you're sleeping with the livestock. See, heat is heat, and in the dead of a medieval winter, the closest warm bodies often come with fur and hooves. Chickens, goats, maybe a sheep or two. They're not just part of the farm, they're your bedfellows. And while you may dream of soft pillows and privacy, what you've got is a bleating, twitchy, slightly damp little sauna made of animals. The goat shifts again. You grunt and scoot forward, bumping into your brother's elbow. Someone mutters something in their sleep about turnips. And then, silence again, broken only by the occasional squawk or the distant bark of a village dog who clearly takes his job way too seriously. The room smells earthy, a mix of hay, sweat, and what can only be described as barn adjacent. But at least it's warm, sort of. The goat radiates heat like a tiny confused stove, and the chickens, fluffed up beside the hearth, contribute their body warmth without complaint. They're used to being portable heating units. You never really get used to it though. Sharing a sleeping space with livestock means waking up to mysterious damp patches, unexpected feathers in your hair, and the possibility that someone, or something, has stolen your blanket. Again. Still, this strange arrangement wasn't uncommon. In fact, in many parts of medieval Europe, it was expected. Livestock were precious, and winters were deadly. You didn't just bring the animals inside for warmth. You did it to keep them alive. If a goat froze outside, that was milk gone. No milk meant no cheese, and no cheese meant starvation by February. One fringe practice, recorded in some northern farming communities, involved dressing pigs in woolen coats before bringing them inside. The idea was to reduce the stink, though whether that worked is still up for debate. One thing's certain, a pig in a poncho is surprisingly cosy to nap beside. Historians still argue whether the peasant class saw this as a necessity or a norm they embraced with reluctant acceptance. Was it shameful to bring the cow into your bedroom, or just another Thursday? Some accounts suggest it was seen as rustic common sense. Others describe clerical complaints about bestial proximity, though those monks probably had heated dormitories and no goats stealing their socks. You shift again, tucking your legs tighter under your tunic. The hearth embers are low now, casting an amber glow across the packed room. Your mother snores lightly. Your father mutters a prayer in his sleep. A chicken lets out a sleepy cluck, dreaming perhaps of summer dust baths and bugs. There's something strangely peaceful about it all. Despite the cold, the smells, and the elbow-to-goat ratio, you feel cocooned. The storm outside might rattle the shutters and send snow curling beneath the door, but inside you're wrapped in a bubble of shared breath and quiet survival. A small thrill of gratitude stirs in your chest, until the goat shifts again and kicks you in the thigh. Right. Gratitude paused. Back to discomfort. You think about the future. Spring will come. It always does. The animals will return to their pens. The chickens will lay more eggs. The piglets will grow fat on new slop. And the house, finally free of straw and droppings and woolly intruders, will smell just a little less like the inside of a boot. For now, though, you accept the reality. You're one part of a living, breathing heating system. You, the family and the animals are woven together by necessity. It's not glamorous. It's not particularly hygienic, but it works. You reach out blindly and nudge the goat away from your ribs. She grumbles but obliges, shifting her weight onto your brother, who wakes with a startled grunt. "Tell her to move," he mutters, half asleep. "She already did," you reply. A pause, then, "I hate her." "She's warmer than you say, pulling your blanket higher." He grunts again, resigned, and the room settles once more. The wind howls outside like a distant sea. Snow patters softly against the shutters, the fire sputters, and here you are, wrapped in 3 layers of wool, 1 goat, 2 chickens, and the inexplicable comfort of surviving the coldest hours together. Eventually, despite it all, the hoof bruises, the tail in your face, the itchy socks, you begin to drift. Your mind quiets. Your body, so tightly curled, finally stops shivering. Sleep comes not like a gentle descent, but like a sudden absence of complaint. You are, for now, as warm as you're going to get. Morning comes slowly, not with light, there's barely any, but with a damp chill that creeps over your nose and into your bones, whispering, "Time to be miserable again." You're still half asleep when the wind yanks at the thatch, and a fine dusting of frost sprinkles down from the rafters, Welcome to medieval insulation, a roof made of straw and hope. You blink up at it from your corner of the cottage and feel the draft skating along the floor like an uninvited ghost. The walls of your house aren't much better. They're made of wattle and daub, basically woven sticks packed with mud, dung and straw, which is a fancy way of saying cold sponge. They crack in places, bulge in others, and suck in every ounce of winter with no remorse. You've stuffed some of the biggest gaps with rags and moss, but they don't do much. When the wind blows hard enough, it moans through the walls like a choir of unhappy spirits. You sit up, shivering. Your tunic feels damp. Your toes are numb. The goat, somehow, is still asleep. The hearth has gone out again. Of course it has. Keeping a fire alive overnight is a delicate science that your family has yet to master. Too much wood and the smoke chokes you out. Too little, and you wake up wondering if you've frozen in place. You poke around the ashes trying to find a spark. Nothing. You sigh and begin the process of rekindling, a ritual that involves blowing into bits of dry grass until your face goes red, cursing softly under your breath, and praying to whatever local saint deals with firewood. Eventually the smallest flame flickers to life. You cup your hands around it and feed it twigs, whispering encouragement like it's a nervous cat. It grows slowly. You add a chunk of last week's log. It smokes angrily, but it holds. You sit back, teeth chattering, watching the room emerge from the gloom. You can see your breath, 3 small puffs with each sigh. The window is more ice than glass. A spider, eternally optimistic, has spun a web in one corner that's now crusted with frost. It's oddly beautiful, like a jeweled net woven by winter herself. You wrap your cloak tighter and look at the door, which has swollen from damp and no longer shuts properly. You wedge it closed with a stone. It's not perfect, but it'll keep the worst of the wind out, for now. Historians still argue whether most medieval homes were designed with insulation in mind or just cobbled together from whatever materials were available. Some point to evidence of double-thick walls and recessed hearths. Others argue that peasants were more focused on speed and necessity than long-term comfort. Judging by your current situation, where you can see daylight through the roof, you lean toward the build it fast, patch it later school of thought. And then there's the floor, dirt. Not packed clay, not stone, just good old-fashioned earth, with a layer of rushes to catch the worst of the mess. You've changed them recently, which means only about half the floor smells like spoiled cabbage now, a big improvement. But here's the thing, even with all the cracks, creaks and icy breezes, this is still your home. Your tiny, smoky, freezing home. You know every board, every draft, every weak spot. You know which rafter drips first when snow melts, which wall leans when the wind gets wild, and which loose plank squeaks loudest in the dead of night. You even know how to read the sounds. When the thatch crackles softly, it means snow is settling in for a while. When the shutters groan, it's the start of a windstorm. When the fire hisses but doesn't smoke, the air outside has shifted to wet. These little things, you learn without thinking. They're survival cues, wrapped in sound. There's a quirky custom in your village, whistling to the walls before bed. Supposedly, it reminds the spirits of the house to stay alert and guard against the cold. You're not sure it works, but it's become a habit. A quick, quiet tune into the gloom before you crawl under the blanket. A tradition as useful as any. You shuffle to the door and ease it open. The world is white. Not fluffy fairy tale white, but bleak, grey-edged snow that crunches like broken pottery underfoot. The sky's the colour of old pewter. A gust hits you in the face and makes your eyes water. Instantly you regret everything. But chores don't wait for the temperature to rise. You step outside and begin your morning with a familiar stomp to knock snow off the thatch. You do it gently. Too hard, and the whole mess might come down at once. Too soft, and the build-up could collapse the roof by nightfall. It's a balancing act like most things in a peasant's life. You pass by the neighbour's house. Their door is ajar, smoke rises faintly. You wave without looking up. They grunt back. That's as cheerful as greetings get this time of year. Back inside, you thaw your hands by the newly revived fire. Someone has stirred, a sleepy cousin maybe. They groan and wrap themselves tighter in their blanket. You smile, just a little, and press your feet closer to the hearth. The warmth is still thin, but it's growing. A new day has begun, inside your windswept, freezing and stubbornly alive little house. The fire is burning again, flickering and popping, sending up curls of smoke that cling to the ceiling beams before slithering out, through the hole in the roof. You sit cross-legged beside it, warming your fingers and trying not to think about the snow creeping in under the door. The light from the flames casts wobbly shadows that dance along the walls. And despite the cold, there's a kind of hush in the cottage now, like the world outside has paused and everyone inside is holding their breath. It's storytelling time. This is the best part of winter nights in the village. No ploughing, no foraging, no back-breaking labour in the fields, just bodies huddled around the hearth, faces flickering orange, eyes wide as someone begins with those sacred words, "You won't believe what happened to so-and-so." Tonight, your uncle leans forward, voice low and gravelly. He tells the tale of the black dog of the North Road, a spectral hound with burning eyes, big as a calf, that chases travellers too bold to stay indoors after dark. According to him, it once ate a bishop whole. The group gasps in practiced horror. You know the story. You've heard it 100 times. But the warmth of it isn't in the plot, it's in the ritual. The sound of his voice, the flick of his fingers, the smell of wood smoke and wool as you lean in together. And of course, there's the herbs. Tonight's fire smells faintly of sage. Not because it's some ancient spiritual cleansing, though some folks will insist it is, but because someone tossed in a bundle of dried kitchen herbs by accident. That doesn't stop your aunt from waving her hands dramatically and declaring that the spirits of the dead are especially interested tonight, which is her way of saying she wants to tell her story next. She recounts the legend of the Whispering Frost, how, in years long past, an old widow supposedly survived an entire winter with no fire, no food, and no help, simply because she spoke kindly to the frost spirits every evening. She'd open her window, madness obviously, and say, "Let's not quarrel tonight, shall we?" And they'd leave her in peace. The moral of the story is either that kindness matters or that your aunt just enjoys being theatrical. One of the children in the room shivers, eyes wide. He clutches a blanket to his chin. Someone tosses another log on the fire. Historians still argue whether peasants truly believed in all these ghostly tales or just used them as a kind of social glue, entertainment mixed with morality tales. Some argue that fear was a tool, keep people indoors, keep kids obedient, keep communities safe through shared fables. Others point to the integration of old pagan lore with newer Christian overlays, like saints replacing nature spirits, or the devil standing in for ancient winter gods. But regardless of belief, the stories endure, and so does the laughter. After the third tale, something about a witch, a turnip, and an enchanted sheep, you all need a break. Someone opens a flask of spiced ale. It's warmish. You sip and immediately feel it in your cheeks, as if your blood suddenly remembered how to circulate. The stories shift tone. Now they're bawdy, crude, the kind you can only get away with when the children are pretending to sleep and the adults are pretending not to notice. You chime in with one about the wandering minstrel who tried to seduce the village baker by writing a love song about her buns. It's not clever, but it gets a few chuckles. Your cousin nearly snorts his ale. The laughter is quiet but full. It rolls through the room like the firelight, warming corners the embers can't reach. The cold is still there, but it's not winning tonight. A quirky tradition you recall from a neighbouring village. Winter nights were the only time some people would allow shadow puppets in the house. The flickering fire, the stillness, the hush. It made the perfect backdrop for simple silhouettes that danced along the walls. Tonight someone shapes their hands into the form of a bird. It flaps wildly across the ceiling, followed by what's either a wolf or a cow, depending on the angle. You're not sure how it started, but you love it. These little performances are almost hypnotic, and soon the children stop fidgeting. Their eyes glaze slightly, their heads tilt. The rhythms of breath change. Someone lets out a long sigh and leans back. The group settles deeper into blankets and cloaks. The logs crackle in protest, but the flames hold. No one announces bedtime, it just happens. The stories end. The light fades, and people rearrange themselves, stretching, curling, shifting into sleeping piles like a nest of exhausted hedgehogs. You lie back on your straw mattress, staring at the ceiling. The faint outlines of the puppet show still linger in your vision. Your uncle mumbles a final prayer, something about keeping the wolves out and the warmth in. Someone else snores already. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a fragment of story stays with you. About a girl who wandered into the forest during the longest night and found a tree that glowed with inner fire. You wonder if it's true. Then again, maybe it doesn't need to be. You close your eyes. The wind whispers through the walls. But tonight, the house feels full, not of warmth necessarily, but of something just as important, the stories that make the cold worth enduring. You stir awake again sometime before dawn, when the room is still cloaked in blue-grey shadow. The fire's burned low, just a faint red eye in the hearth, and the cold has crept back in like a nosy neighbour who knows the door doesn't latch properly. You shift under your blanket, trying not to wake the pig snoring gently next to your feet. It's too early to get up and too cold to sleep soundly, so naturally your mind drifts to your bed. Or more accurately, to the sorry excuse for one. Let's break it down. Your bed is essentially a wooden frame stuffed with straw or dried bracken. Maybe a sack of chaff if someone was feeling fancy. It creaks when you breathe and pokes you from every angle, as if the mattress itself resents your existence. You fluff it occasionally, by which we mean stomping on it until the lumps feel evenly distributed. And maybe replace the straw once a season if the mice haven't claimed it first. Still, compared to some, you've got it good. Many peasants just slept on the floor, curled in cloaks, using shoes as pillows. Families with a bit more coin built raised wooden platforms to get off the damp ground. Even fewer had the coveted curtained bed, often shared between multiple siblings, cousins, and whoever didn't smell too offensive that week. The curtain wasn't for privacy, it was to trap body heat. A wool-lined microclimate in a room where the temperature might match the contents of your root cellar. And oh, the blankets. Coarse wool, usually, woven thick and heavy, stiff in winter and suspiciously damp in spring. If you're lucky, you've got more than one. If you're really lucky, you've got an old fur thrown on top, rabbit, fox, maybe even sheepskin, passed down like a royal heirloom. There's a fringe theory that in some mountain villages people would heat bricks in the fire and wrap them in cloth to place at the foot of their beds. You've never seen this done, but you've heard the tale enough times to wish it were real. Instead, you settle for socks and prayers. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant bed was any better than sleeping in a pile of leaves. Some manuscripts suggest basic carpentry skills were enough to craft a sturdy bed frame with ropes or slats. Others describe simpler setups, straw mats or even communal bedding in large halls, especially during lean winters when survival mattered more than spinal alignment. Your bed has one main feature worth noting: the canopy. It's not decorative, it's practical. A simple frame or loop of rope strung overhead, draped with spare cloth or sack stitched together. It catches falling debris, bits of thatch, dust, the occasional startled spider, and holds in a few extra degrees of warmth. During harsh storms, you might even rig extra layers around the sides to form a tent within your bedroom. It's damp, it smells faintly of onions, but it works. And while your mattress is trying to eat your spine one poke at a time, you remind yourself it could be worse. You once visited a cousin in a neighbouring village whose bed was a hollowed-out bench beside the fireplace. He claimed it was warmest there. You believed him until you saw his blanket was made from stitched-together burlap sacks and what looked suspiciously like part of a feed bag. Still, you can't deny the coziness of your own setup. Familiar creaks, the smell of straw and wool, the muffled sounds of your family sleeping. It's not exactly a luxury suite, but it has charm, or at least, it has the sort of worn-in stability that only comes from surviving many winters and several accidental fires. And then there's the bedtime routine. You've got your own little checklist: pile the straw high, beat out any mice, wedge a hot stone near your feet, if you remember to warm one, check the canopy for leaks, and brace the blanket with a wooden pin so it doesn't slip off in the night. It's a production, sure, but by the time you're settled in, you've earned every inch of that sleep. Tonight, or rather this pre-dawn moment, you contemplate refluffing your pillow. It's made from old rags stuffed in a linen sack, and currently flatter than a peasant's coin purse. You thump it a few times, adjust the cloth wrapping your head, and close your eyes. A rooster crows in the distance. You open one eye, it crows again, this time closer. You groan. You briefly consider hurling your pillow at it, but A, you need your pillow, and B, it's probably not the rooster's fault that nature decided 4:47 a.m. was a good time to start things up again. You sigh and roll over. The fire will need rebuilding soon. The goats will want feeding, and you'll probably have to clear more snow off the thatch. But not quite yet. For one last moment, you let yourself sink back into the straw, wrapped in your scratchy ancient bedding, nestled under the sagging cloth canopy that's seen more winters than your grandmother's teeth. This is comfort, medieval style. Lumpy, smelly, cold, and somehow still yours. Your stomach growls. It's a low, grumbling protest, the kind that makes you glance around in shame even though everyone else is either asleep or pretending to be. Hunger comes early in winter and stays late, like a bored relative with nowhere else to be. You try to ignore it, pulling the wool blanket higher over your shoulder, but it's no use. Time for a midnight snack. Or, in your case, a not quite the worst thing you've ever eaten snack. You shuffle quietly to the hearth, careful not to disturb the pig, who has now somehow stolen half the blanket. The fire's barely holding on, a few glowing embers buried beneath ash. You prod it gently, coaxing a weak flicker to life, and grab the small clay pot that's been simmering since supper. Inside, something approximating stew. Sort of. It's a thin broth with the memory of vegetables, a few limp greens, a lump of barley, a suspicious shred of meat you're 80% sure isn't rat. It smells earthy, a bit sour, and exactly like desperation seasoned with thyme. But it's warm, and it's food, and that's more than a lot of people get this time of year. You slurp it slowly, crouched beside the fire. The warmth spreads from your stomach outward, reaching your toes just enough to trick them into staying attached. A second mouthful reveals a soft chunk of something starchy. Turnip, maybe, or parsnip, or whatever the cook managed to dig up before the frost sealed the garden like a tomb. Midnight eating isn't just a guilty pleasure, it's a necessity. Medieval peasants burned calories like mad. Chores, cold, stress, more chores, it all added up. Going to bed on an empty stomach? Bad idea. You'd wake up freezing, cranky, and with all the energy of a frostbitten rock. There's a fringe tale from the next village over. Old Marta once made a stew so thick and fatty it walked out of the pot. Legend says it was so hearty you could survive off a single spoonful for a whole day. Realistically, it probably just had a lot of lard in it, but still something to aspire to. Historians still argue whether medieval diets were chronically deficient or surprisingly adaptable. Some claim peasants ate a monotonous, barely nourishing blend of grains, cabbage, and weak ale. Others point to archaeological evidence of surprisingly varied rural diets, when harvests were good. Dried peas, root vegetables, cured meat, pickled everything. Of course, in winter, that variety shrank to the size of your storage cupboard. You glance toward the pantry, a generous term for the shelf by the door. On it sit a crock of sauerkraut, a bundle of garlic, some onions braided together like limp hair, and a sad little loaf of black bread that could double as a blunt weapon. There's also a tiny jar of something spicy and red, which your mother swears is good for the blood, and probably not spoiled. You'll pass on that one for now. You tear off a piece of the bread and dunk it into the stew. It softens just enough to be chewable, barely. The taste is dense, bitter, and vaguely sour, but it fills a hole, and that's all you're after tonight. While you eat, you think about the village cook-off from a few weeks back, the last of the fall festivals. The winner had crafted something called Hunter's Porridge, which contained at least 5 ingredients you couldn't name and may have involved fermented milk. People are still talking about it. You made a note to trade for the recipe next year, or steal it. Depends on your moral flexibility come spring. You finish your midnight snack and set the pot back by the coals. It'll keep until morning, if the pig doesn't find it first. Wiping your hands on your tunic, again, fashion is dead. You glance around the room. It's quieter now. Your uncle's snoring has softened. The fire is crackling just enough to cast gentle shadows. You sit back for a moment, savouring the stillness. This is the part no one writes songs about, the tiny moment between hunger and sleep, between cold and warmth, when your stomach is just full enough and the room is just quiet enough, and your fingers are just warm enough to feel okay. Not great, not happy, but okay. You head back to bed, stepping over the chicken who's made a nest from someone's spare hat. The goat shifts but doesn't open her eyes. You reclaim your spot, tug the blanket back from the pig, gently, you're not a monster, and curl up again. You burp softly. The stew lingers on your breath like boiled sock water. But it did the job. Your belly is warm now. Your body relaxes. And the cold, for the moment, keeps its distance. You wake up again, but not because of noise, cold, or the goat. Blessedly still asleep. No, this time it's something stranger. You're just awake. Not groggy, not frantic, just alert and oddly peaceful. Welcome to the medieval phenomenon of the second sleep. It's not insomnia. In fact, it's so common that people didn't even have a word for it. You fall asleep after supper, sleep deeply for a few hours, then wake naturally somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. Not to fret, not to panic, just to be. You stretch, you hum, maybe say a prayer, maybe gossip with whoever's awake. It's your bonus time, the night shift of the soul. You sit up, your blanket slinking off your shoulders, and notice your sister is already stirring. She's fiddling with a bit of embroidery by firelight, one of those projects that will probably never be finished, but exist to keep her hands busy during these odd little hours. "What time is it?" you ask softly. She shrugs. "Dark o'clock." Reasonable. Second sleep wasn't just a quirk, it was a whole rhythm. People used it for meditation, whispering secrets, even sneaking off for private meetings. Some would light a small lamp and read from religious texts. Others might grind grain, sew, or check on the animals. It wasn't weird. It was normal. A built-in pause button in the middle of the night. There's a fringe folk belief that second sleep is when dreams are closest to the waking world. That if you sit very still and listen closely, the dead might whisper advice. You've never heard any dead relatives, but you have heard your cousin mutter in his sleep about turnips and debt, which feels roughly equivalent. Historians still debate why segmented sleep was so widespread. Some argue it was a biological response to artificial lighting, or the lack thereof. Without glowing screens or city lights, your body naturally synced to the dark in stages. Others suggest it was cultural, part of the slow, cyclical life of rural communities that didn't need to cram everything into one block of consciousness. Either way, it was real, and tonight you're living it. You grab a chunk of that bit of bread from earlier and nibble at it. It's gone cold and somehow even denser. You could probably use it to patch a hole in the wall. You chew thoughtfully as the fire hisses and pops beside you. The shadows dance again, softer now, not so menacing. Your sister threads her needle through a worn bit of cloth. "You ever think about what rich folks do at night?" she asks suddenly. "Sleep under blankets that don't itch," you reply. She laughs. "You think they do second sleep?" "Probably not," you say. "They've got enough comfort to stay under all night." She nods, though you both know they probably still wake sometimes, just with better snacks and fewer pigs. You both fall quiet again. Outside, the wind has slowed. You can almost imagine the world pausing along with you, moonlight touching snow-covered fields, ice hanging from bare branches like crystals, the village curled in a deep breath between two halves of night. In some nearby regions, second sleep was a time for love. Married couples whispered, giggled, slipped into each other's arms. You glance across the room at your parents snoring loudly in opposite directions. Not tonight, apparently. Others took it as time to think, reflect, talk to God, plan next year's planting, mourn what was lost. In a life where daylight is ruled by labour, this quiet slice of night belonged to you alone. You lie back down, chewing the last of the bread, your thoughts drifting like smoke. This hour between sleeps is strange, soft-edged. The world feels gentler, like it's not asking anything of you for once. You're just allowed to exist. Your breath fogs slightly, you tug the blanket tighter, and slowly, like stepping into a familiar river, you begin to sink again, drifting back toward that second slumber. The fire dims, the room quiets, and somewhere between one dream and the next you fall back asleep, not with a jolt, but with a sigh. Thunk. You blink awake to that familiar, irritating sound. Thunk. Thunk. It's the wind again, pushing something against the shutters like a bored giant flicking pine cones. The fire's gone out completely this time, leaving only cold ashes and the faint scent of last night's stew. You burrow deeper under your blanket, but it's no use. The cold is back, and it's not being subtle. It seeps in from every crack and seam in the house. You feel it in your spine, in your nose, in your teeth. You could swear your breath froze mid-air and dropped to the floor. You peek out and instantly regret it. The rat's back. It scurries across the rafters like it owns the place, bold and squeaky. You watch it with half-lidded eyes, and no intention of doing anything about it. That rat's lived here longer than you. You've even named it Sir Itchpaw. He respects no boundaries and probably nibbled your sock last week. You've made peace with his tenancy, though not with his 3 a.m. tap dance routine. You shift positions and feel a draft slide up your back like an ice-cold tongue. You groan. There's a hole in the door again, probably from when your cousin tripped over the water bucket and slapped into the wall. You stuffed it with moss, but moss isn't exactly known for its thermal efficiency, and it's not just the wind, it's the snoring. Loud, relentless, somehow bouncing off the ceiling beams in surround sound. You suspect your uncle has weaponized it. Every inhale sounds like a dying ox, every exhale like a boiling kettle. You roll away, only to get a foot in the ribs from someone else. Cozy. And then there's the smoke. Even without a fire burning, the smell lingers. Every surface in the house is coated in a thin film of soot. You breathe it in with every sleepy gasp. Some days you wonder if your lungs are made of oak bark by now. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants suffered long-term effects from indoor smoke inhalation. Some evidence shows signs of chronic respiratory conditions in remains from colder regions. Others argue the open design of homes allowed enough ventilation to keep damage minimal. You're not sure who's right, but if you cough up a chimney pebble tomorrow, you'll have your answer. You sit up. Your blanket clings to you with the tenacity of wet cheesecloth. You shuffle to the wall and examine the latest gap. Yep, moss isn't cutting it. You find an old rag and stuff it in, then wedge a wooden spoon against it for good measure. It's a temporary fix, like everything in this house, but it's better than nothing. The pig grunts in her sleep. Thunk. There's that wind again. You glance at the door. The latch is holding, but barely. Snow's pushed up against the bottom crack, and the floor is dusted with icy powder. You kick it away with a half-hearted swipe of your foot, then throw another handful of dry rushes over the wet patch. The house creaks like an old ship. The roof groans. Somewhere in the rafters, a chunk of thatch slips and lands on someone's head with a soft plop. They grumble, but don't wake. You lie back down and pull the blanket over your ears. You try to think warm thoughts. Sun on the fields, warm bread, hot cider. Unfortunately, your brain conjures up a visual of your sister's stew instead, and you wince. A quirky folk practice you remember from your aunt, keeping a smooth river stone under your pillow to absorb unfriendly cold. She insisted the stone remembered warmth from summer. You tried it once. The only thing it remembered was being extremely hard. Thunk. You wonder what it is this time. A loose shutter, a pine branch, a ghost knocking politely. At this point you wouldn't be surprised. You close your eyes, trying to ignore the chill, the snoring, the footsteps of Sir Itchpaw above you. This is just part of the night now. Rat, draft, snore, repeat. Somehow you always fall back asleep eventually. You curl into yourself again, hugging the warmth that remains. The blanket is rough against your face. Your toes tingle as they thaw. And as your thoughts start to drift, you realize something. You're getting used to it. Not because it's comfortable, not because it's pleasant, but because it's yours. This leaky, smoky, snore-filled house is the only fortress you've got against the cold, the dark, and whatever's knocking outside. And for now, it's holding. Thunk. Still holding. You really, truly do not want to get out of bed. But nature has a funny way of ignoring your desires, especially medieval nature, which tends to knock not so much gently as with a battering ram. You squirm, you fidget. You try every position known to mankind to ignore the growing pressure in your bladder. No luck. It's time. You peel back the blanket and instantly regret your entire existence. The air slaps your skin like a wet towel that's been in the snow. You whisper a quick apology to your body and begin the slow, painful crawl out from under the covers. Your toes hit the floor and you hiss. The rushes underfoot feel like frozen nettles, and the moment your feet leave the relative safety of the blanket cocoon, they begin contemplating amputation. You shuffle toward the door, not really walking so much as impersonating a miserable, freezing slug. Ah yes, the medieval outhouse shuffle. Now, in some households, lucky or better prepared, there's a chamber pot tucked under the bed. You do in fact have one, but it's full. It's been full since last night. No one has emptied it. You briefly consider risking it, but the memory of last winter's spillage incident is still too fresh. So, it's the outhouse. You open the cottage door and are greeted by a gust of wind so cold it actually makes you blink. The snow has crusted over. It crunches loudly under your steps as you navigate the short path between house and privy, teeth clenched, every muscle screaming, "Why are we doing this?" The moon is low. The trees groan in the wind. You feel very small, very cold, and very aware of how utterly exposed your backside is about to be. The outhouse is generously a box with a hole, a crooked door, a bench, and smells that could wrestle a bear. You enter with the grim determination of someone heading into battle. The seat is made of wood and is approximately the temperature of a glacier. You brace yourself, perform the necessary business with the speed and efficiency of someone being chased by wolves, and stumble back outside. You breathe. Cold air, but also relief. You trudge back to the house, feet numb, joints stiff, hands tucked into your armpits. As you near the door, you spot something just to the left. The neighbour's dog, curled into a ball under the eaves, eyes closed, steam rising faintly from its nose. It's somehow adorable and heartbreaking at the same time. Back inside, you ease the door shut, wedge it again with that same rock, and toss a handful of sticks onto the hearth. No time for a full fire, but just enough to knock the edge off the chill. You hop from foot to foot, trying to convince your toes they haven't been abandoned. Historians still argue whether most peasants had access to proper latrines or just used communal ditches and buckets. Some suggest elaborate privy pits, lined with straw or ash, especially in better organised manors. Others insist that for most folks, nature was the lavatory, and modesty a luxury few could afford. Your outhouse? It's a masterwork of crooked angles and freezing regret. You crawl back under the blanket, socks half off, fingers aching. The bed feels like a refrigerated cabbage patch, but it's yours. The pig grumbles at your return. She liked the extra legroom. You glance at the chamber pot again. Still full, still off limits. A fringe belief in your village insists that spilling a chamber pot after midnight invites illness into the home. Probably a practical way to make kids extra careful, but it's worked its way into your brain. You're not risking it, not again. There's a lull now. The wind is slower, almost thoughtful. You exhale deeply, watching the puff of breath swirl into the air above you like a ghost finally leaving the room. Your sister mumbles something in her sleep. Your brother turns over and somehow manages to steal another foot of blanket without waking. You lie there, exhausted, sore, mildly traumatized by the outhouse bench but victorious. You face the cold. You returned alive. Sort of. The fire hisses. The rat in the rafters makes a final scamper. And finally, sleep starts to fold over you once more. Quiet, heavy, and slightly less interrupted. By the time the sun peeks out, if you can call that pale, hazy light sun, you're already trapped. Snowed in. The cottage door groans against a thick wall of snow, packed in by last night's wind. You push, then push harder. Nothing. The snow has drifted high enough to bury the entrance like a giant sneeze. You're not going anywhere today. No fields, no forest paths, no outhouse shuffle. Mixed feelings about that one. You glance out the frost-laced window, squinting through the clouded glass. Everything is white, silent, still. It's like the whole world has been muffled with a heavy woolen blanket. You're snowed in. Welcome to your new reality. Now begins the cabin fever portion of winter. At first it's cosy. The fire's burning. Someone's heating a pot of onion and parsnip stew that, if you close your eyes and really focus, smells vaguely like food. The pig has been moved to a less drafty spot. The family is gathered together, blankets wrapped tight, warming hands over shared mugs of ale or thickened broth. It's not bad at first. There's laughter, jokes, someone tries to sing, but then it drags. You've played the same dice game 5 times now, and your cousin keeps winning by sheer luck and smugness. You're down to eating dried apples and pickled cabbage. The room smells like wet wool and socks. You start humming old songs just to fill the space, and someone threatens to throw a turnip at you if you keep going. You'd kill for a loaf of fresh bread, or a walk, or even just 5 minutes of being outside where you don't have to smell 8 other people and 3 animals. Still, there's something charming about the ridiculousness of it all. You're stuck, yes, but so is everyone else. You settle into the rhythm of it, play a game, reheat stew, sing a rude song about the village reeve's bald spot, nap repeat. There's a quirky tradition in your village. During snow-ins, people pass time by composing blizzard songs. They're short, usually rhymed, always funny and preferably insulting. Today's top hit is about your uncle's toenails being sharp enough to slice cheese. It earns a round of groans and exactly 1 snort laugh. Someone dares to suggest a game of Who Farted. You decline, immediately and with prejudice. The hours pass. Light shifts across the window, turning from grey to slightly greyer. You wrap your cloak tighter and try to read the carved lines in the wooden table, names scratched by relatives long dead, a crude drawing of what might be a deer or a cow, or someone's idea of a demon. Historians still argue whether long periods of isolation during harsh winters led to increased storytelling traditions, or just made everyone slowly lose their minds. Some claim these snow-ins were vital bonding times, especially in smaller, tighter-knit communities. Others point to written complaints, where they exist, about tempers flaring and cabin brawls breaking out over who got the last crust of bread. You suspect both are true. By midday, you've started building miniature houses out of kindling. You name one, Warmtopia, and imagine a life inside where the beds are soft, the soup doesn't have floating hairs, and no one breathes directly into your ear while you try to sleep. Your sister starts stitching again. Your father whittles something vaguely spoon-shaped. Your mother insists on organising the herb bundles for the 4th time this week, muttering about idle hands. And then someone suggests the sock game. The sock game is exactly what it sounds like. Take a sock, ball it up, and throw it at someone when they're not paying attention. If they catch it, you're out. If they drop it, you get a point. It's stupid. It's pointless. It's glorious. Within 20 minutes, the pig has been hit 3 times, your cousin is declaring himself the king of socks, and your mother is swearing under her breath while trying not to laugh. It's the best time you've had all week. Eventually the laughter dies down. People settle again. The fire burns low. You scrape the bottom of the stew pot, fishing out one last bit of turnip that somehow avoided detection all day. Victory. Outside, the snow still falls, a soft whisper against the shutters. Inside, you're warm, or warm enough. The walls creak, but they hold. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, onions, and people who haven't bathed since last market day. You lie back, stretched out on your straw pile, stomach slightly full, heart slightly lighter. The snow may have the roads, the paths, the world outside, but in here you've got games, jokes, rude songs, and the world's ugliest socks sailing through the air like a poorly thrown dream. You close your eyes. Thunk. Right between the eyes. You crack one eye open. Your cousin grins. Still king, he says. Thunk. 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 The sock is flying again. You lie still under your blanket, hoping if you pretend to be asleep, they'll choose a new target. It's morning, technically, though you wouldn't know it from the dim grey light oozing in through the window. The cottage is a sluggish mass of snoring, groaning, and the unmistakable sound of someone stepping in something unpleasant. Possibly stew, possibly not. And then, there it is. The first crow of the rooster. Loud, smug, unapologetic. You groan. There are no alarm clocks in the medieval village, but that rooster has a soul forged in chaos. He crows once at dawn, again at what he thinks might be dawn, and a few more times throughout the day just for good measure. He's joined by the neighbour's rooster in a competitive crow-off that usually ends with both birds yelling into the wind for 20 minutes and everyone within earshot contemplating poultry-based revenge. Still, that's not your only wake-up call. Down the road, a church bell begins its slow toll. Bong. Bong. It echoes across the frozen fields and rattles in through your crooked shutters. You know the rhythm, 3 slow tolls for sunrise. You also know that if you don't get up soon, someone's going to pour cold water on your head, by accident. There are a surprising number of natural alarm systems in your life. Besides roosters and bells, there's the bread lady, Marta the baker's daughter, who sings off-key as she hauls the morning loaves up the lane. She hits a high note so sharp that it once cracked a clay pot on someone's porch. And then, of course, there's her. Wake up, you lazy bones. Your great-aunt, already dressed and sweeping, somehow louder than both the rooster and the bell combined. She slams the broom handle against the rafters like a war drum. A rooster shrieks in protest. Somewhere, a rat flees. You sit up, hair sticking out like thatch, eyes barely open. It's not even properly light out yet. A quirky tradition in your village claims that if you wake up before the rooster 3 days in a row, you'll be blessed with luck and strong knees for the rest of the year. Your knees still creak, so clearly you've never managed it. Historians still argue how regimented the average peasant's mornings really were. Some believe villagers rose at first light without fail, driven by chores and livestock. Others suggest mornings were more fluid, based on weather, season, and personal rhythms. You suspect it's a bit of both. When there's snow on the ground and your water bucket's frozen solid, No one's racing to milk the cow before sunrise. Speaking of the cow, moo, that's your final alarm. Not loud but persistent. It's the sound of an udder that's ready and not interested in your excuses. You sigh, swing your feet out from under the covers, and immediately regret it. The floor is like ice. Your boots are stiff with yesterday's slush. Your breath fogs as you exhale. Good morning. You pull on your cloak, still half asleep, and stumble outside. The sky's a sheet of dull pewter. Your breath curls in the air like ghost smoke. Snow crunches underfoot, and the wind bites at any inch of exposed skin with little fangs. The village is waking, but reluctantly. You see flickers of movement, someone knocking ice off a barrel, someone cursing as they try to unstick a gate, someone slipping and trying to pretend it didn't happen. You pass the rooster. He glares at you from atop the fence post, clearly proud of his morning performance. You nod at him, half in respect, half in threat. The cow greets you with a warm breath and a flick of the ear. She's cranky, but at least she's warmer than the air. You reach for the pail and begin milking, your hands stiff but practiced. The rhythm is comforting, familiar. Back in the house, the fire has been coaxed into life. A pot of porridge simmers. Your sister has already started slicing onions for stew. Your great-aunt hums a hymn that's mostly off-key, but you find yourself humming along anyway. Your brother stumbles in, hair wilder than yours, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Why is it always the rooster?" he asks, voice groggy. "Because he hates us," you reply. He nods. "Figures." You sit down on the stool nearest the hearth, letting the heat lick your knees. You're still tired, still cold, but also, strangely, alive in that sleepy, half-functioning way only winter mornings allow. Outside, the wind picks up. The bell tolls again, this time for morning prayer. You listen to it echo through the village and think for just a moment that it sounds less like a summons and more like a reminder. You're here. You woke up. The snow didn't bury you. The rooster's still crowing. The stew's still burning. Life goes on. You stare at the basin. It's a chunk of wood, slightly cracked, filled with what was supposed to be water. Right now, it's ice. A thin, cloudy sheet stretches across the top like nature's cruel joke. You tap it with a finger. Solid. You sigh. This is your morning routine now. Start the day by trying to thaw enough water to splash on your face without giving yourself frostbite. You grab the basin and shuffle it closer to the hearth, where the fire is doing its best impersonation of warmth. After a few minutes and some encouraging muttering, the ice begins to crack. You break it carefully with the back of a spoon, scoop out the slush and toss it into a bucket by the door. Congratulations! You've just invented the least refreshing bath in history. You dip a cloth in the now murky water, wring it out and scrub your face. It's like being kissed by winter's fist. You gasp, your eyes water, your brain protests. But when you're done, at least you're awake. Sort of. You reach for your tunic, yesterday's, because changing clothes daily is a luxury you stopped dreaming about long ago. It smells faintly of stew, smoke, and something less identifiable. You shrug it on anyway. You tie your belt, tug on your boots, and prepare yourself mentally for what lies ahead. Outside, it's not much warmer than the water in the basin. Your breath fogs immediately, curling around your face like a small ghost that refuses to leave. The wind whistles, the snow crunches. You trudge across the yard toward the woodshed, where your morning begins in earnest. Your fingers are already stiff as you hoist the axe. Splitting kindling in sub-zero weather is a meditative process. You don't think, you just swing, crack, swing, crack. Each strike echoes through the frozen air like a drum beat for the tired. You load a few logs into your arms and return to the house, trying not to slip on the packed snow. You fail. You go down like a sack of frozen onions, logs scattering in every direction. You lie there for a second, blinking up at the sky, wondering if this is how it ends. "Should we bury him now or later?" your sister calls from the door, smirking. You groan and sit up. "Put it in the song," she does. She adds a verse to yesterday's blizzard song about your heroic fall and how the pig mourned you for 5 whole minutes. The family finds it hilarious. The pig seems indifferent. Inside, the fire is still going strong. You stack the wood, peel off your cloak, and return to your corner for breakfast. Today, it's more of the usual. Porridge. Lumpy, lukewarm, and flavoured mostly by hope. You eat it slowly, staring into the embers. Historians still debate whether peasants dreaded winter mornings or simply accepted them as routine. Some argue that the body adapts to hardship, that expectations recalibrate to match the season. Others believe that every morning was a small trial, a quiet misery endured with silent stoicism. Judging by how you nearly froze your face off earlier, you're inclined to agree with the latter. After breakfast, it's time for work. Even snowbound, there are things to do. Check the livestock, turn the compost heap, frozen solid naturally, shovel paths, and see if the neighbour's roof has caved in yet. You wrap up and head out again, each breath hissing in the cold. The world is dull white, flat light. Your eyes ache from squinting. You pass your neighbour, who's using a ladle to chip ice out of his well bucket. "Morning," he says, not bothering to look up. "Is it?" you reply. He grunts. That's agreement. A quirky habit has developed in your village. Morning competitions to see who can unstick the outhouse latch fastest. So far, the record is held by Marta, the baker's daughter, who claims she used hot breath and sheer rage. You tried last week. You broke a fingernail and cried. You spend the next hour clearing snow from the animal pens. The goats complain, the chickens complain louder, and the cow just stares at you with what can only be described as profound disappointment. Eventually you make it back inside. Your fingers tingle from the rewarming process. You sit by the fire and doze briefly, face tilted toward the heat, one eye twitching from fatigue. Then someone drops a ladle, the pig squeals, and it's time to peel turnips. You do so with the quiet resolve of someone who knows this is the best it's going to get today. Eventually the sun, such as it is, begins to sink. Shadows stretch long across the packed snow outside. You light a tallow candle and squint through the gloom, fingers raw from washing and chopping. By the time you settle back onto your straw bed that evening, you're so tired you don't even notice the cold at first. Your body aches, your eyes burn, your hands smell like onion and ash. But the fire is steady, the stew isn't half bad, and the rooster, for once, is silent. You close your eyes and hope tomorrow brings a warmer morning. You wake up groaning, sore in places you didn't even know had nerves. Every joint creaks like a badly built cart. The fire is barely glowing, just a faint heartbeat of heat, and outside the wind has picked up again, pressing snow against the door like a persistent beggar. You shuffle toward the hearth, teeth chattering, and toss on a few sticks of kindling. Your sister stirs, wraps the blanket tighter, and mutters something that sounds vaguely threatening. The pig farts. "Good morning. Today's priority isn't splitting wood or milking cows or even thawing the outhouse latch. It's warmth. And not just your own, it's communal warmth time. This is the season when everyone leans on each other, literally and figuratively. You survive winter not just with fire and food, but with company, shared breath, shared jokes, shared layers of damp wool. The cold isn't kind to loners. The warmth, such as it is something you build together. You start by checking on old Agnes. Her roof leaks and she's down to one good leg, but she'll never admit she needs help. You arrive with a bundle of kindling, a pot of broth, and a blanket that smells like goat and mildew but is at least thick. She eyes you suspiciously. "I'm not dying," she growls. "I know," you say, setting the pot down. "But if you were, you'd want hot stew." She grunts, which is about as grateful as Agnes gets. This is how it works. You help others not because you expect anything back, but because someone helped you last week, or last winter, or 5 winters ago when your roof caved in and half the village dragged buckets of snow out of your kitchen. There's an unspoken rule in your community. When the cold comes, generosity multiplies. People swap firewood like playing cards. Someone without stew shares cabbage. Someone without cabbage swaps socks. You once traded a turnip for a candle stub and felt like a master negotiator. A fringe practice among the neighbouring hill folk. They'd gather once a week in the largest home and share a single fire. Everyone would bring a chair, a cup, and something to burn, even if it was just dried weeds. The warmth would be meagre, but the storytelling and laughter would heat the room faster than any logs could. They called it circle heat. You always liked the sound of that. Historians still argue whether peasant villages functioned with true communal spirit, or if that's just a romanticised modern view. Some suggest mutual aid was survival-based, not kindness-driven. Others argue that winter demanded cooperation in ways summer never could. Judging by the extra blanket someone left on your doorstep last night, no note, just neatly folded. You're leaning toward the side of human decency. You make your rounds. At the blacksmith's cottage, you trade a spool of thread for some half-charred wood. At the Reeves barn, you help patch a gap in the siding with a woven mat and get a handful of dried mushrooms in return. At Marta the baker's, you pick up a loaf of coarse brown bread and leave behind 2 onions and a promise to shovel her path next storm. By the time you return home, your arms are full, your boots are soaked, and your nose has stopped functioning entirely. But your belly is hopeful, and the cottage smells better than usual. Someone's boiled herbs to freshen the air. Someone else is humming. It's not a good tune, but it's warm. You all huddle around the hearth again, legs tangled, shoulders pressed together, a mishmash of cloaks and cloaks over cloaks. You pass around a bowl of stew. There's more in it than usual, onions, mushrooms, even a stray carrot. You taste something spicy and realise someone must have donated their last bit of horseradish. Bold move. After the meal, you play another round of the sock game, then a round of guess that smell, always a mistake. Then your brother starts carving rude faces into a turnip, and the room descends into the kind of chaos only mild hypothermia and boredom can produce. But you're warm, not all over. Your feet are still questionable. Your ears are one draft away from retirement. But your middle is warm, your laugh is warm, the space between you and everyone else is warm. You start to think, this isn't survival. This is something more. Not comfort. Not really. But kinship, knit together by wool and whispered stories and the slow, stubborn fire in the middle of it all. You lean your head against your sister's shoulder, feel the movement of her breathing, and let your eyes fall closed. The pig farts again. Still warm. You sneeze. It's the kind of sneeze that rattles your whole skull and ends in a tiny whimper. Your nose is red. Your eyes are watery. Your ears are ringing slightly, though that might just be your aunt humming a funeral dirge in the corner while grinding garlic. Either way, it's official. You have the cold. Not a cold. The cold. The one that creeps into your joints, stuffs your sinuses with wool, and makes you wonder if you're about to sneeze out a lung. You wrap your blanket tighter and shuffle to the hearth like a medieval zombie. Someone offers you a steaming mug of something thick and terrifying. You raise a brow. They nod solemnly. It's onion ale with ground mustard seed, they whisper. Warms the blood. You sip. You immediately wish you hadn't. It tastes like spicy bathwater. Your throat burns. Your eyes water more. Your aunt claps approvingly and begins grinding more garlic for round 2. Welcome to the wide and wonderful world of medieval cold remedies. There's no pharmacy, no cough syrup, no menthol lozenges, just a dizzying mix of herbs, hope, and questionable choices. Some swear by nettle tea, others by hot ale with cloves. Your grandmother used to rub goose fat on your chest and tie a cabbage leaf around your neck. Did it work? Hard to say. But you smelled like stew for 3 days. The latest remedy making rounds in your village involves heated sheep dung wrapped in linen. You haven't tried it. Yet. You're saving that for when things get really bleak. A fringe custom from the coastal villages involved whispering your symptoms into a dried fish bladder and hanging it over the fire. The sickness, they said, would drift out with the smoke. Frankly, you'd try it if you had a fish bladder handy. Historians still argue whether these remedies had any medicinal value or were simply a way to give people a sense of control. Some herbs, like garlic and sage, do have antimicrobial properties. Others, like boiled mouse broth, are probably just creative suffering. Either way, you're in no position to be picky. Your aunt is now heating a clay pot filled with onion skins, crushed radish, and something that smells suspiciously like feet. She stirs with a carved spoon and hums louder, clearly enjoying your misery. You'll thank me by sunrise, she says. You sneeze again and wrap the blanket over your head, like a monk preparing for battle. At least you're not the only one sniffling. Half the cottage sounds like a haunted bellows. Your brother's eyes are puffy. Your sister is sipping vinegar water and looking suspiciously healthier than everyone else, which leads to some light accusations of witchcraft. She denies everything and adds more time to the pot. You remember an old rhyme? For every sniffle, there's a brew of herbs and roots and something blue. If it tastes like rotten glue, it probably won't kill you. Comforting. You sit close to the fire, letting the heat bake your knees and maybe melt the icicles inside your nose. Someone hands you a cloth. You sneeze into it. Then someone else hands you a second cloth. That one's the goat's blanket, they say, looking horrified. You apologize to the goat. She blinks slowly, clearly judging you. Even the local priest offers remedies. He once advised your cousin to sleep with a clove of garlic under his tongue and a cross made of hawthorn twigs tied around his neck. Your cousin smelled like a haunted salad bar for a week, but he swears he got better. You, however, opt for the simpler route: rest, stew, and the general hope that you'll wake up tomorrow feeling 10% less like a turnip with lungs. By nightfall, the cottage has transformed into a sick room. Blankets draped everywhere, coughs bouncing between walls, a pot of broth bubbles slowly over the fire filled with things that are either healing roots or garden detritus. You lie back on your straw bed, nose stuffed, throat raw, but strangely soothed. There's something about being sick in a room full of other sick people that makes it feel less lonely. You're all in it together, all sniffling, sneezing, groaning, and sipping the same revolting tea. It's gross, it's uncomfortable, it's absurd, it's family. The last thing you hear before drifting off is your aunt's whisper, "Don't forget to rub the garlic on your feet." You do forget, on purpose. The stew has finally stopped tasting like boiled regret. That's because tonight is not just another freezing, sniffly, sneezy night. It's festival night. Yes, really. Even in the bleakest, coldest stretch of the year, medieval villagers knew the importance of throwing a party, if only to keep spirits from freezing solid like the latrine bucket out back. Tonight, you celebrate the midwinter festival, or, as your cousin likes to call it, the only excuse to sing off-key while eating questionable meat. The day begins with quiet anticipation. The cold is still here, of course. The wind still sounds like a grumpy banshee, but there's a hum of energy in the air, a flicker of excitement. People wear their nice clothes, which mostly means slightly less stained than usual, and someone starts heating up cider that's been fermenting since harvest. Outside, the snow crunches under boots as villagers gather. Torches are lit. The soft yellow glow flickers against the deep blue twilight. Children run between legs, bundled like fabric sausages, faces red from cold and glee. Someone's brought out a drum, someone else a pipe. And just like that, the cold doesn't matter so much. You join the procession as it begins, slow, joyful, meandering through the lanes. The torch parade is an old custom, said to chase away evil spirits and bring warmth back to the earth. You don't know about spirits, but you do know that standing near a torch is the warmest you've been all week. People sing old songs, half-remembered verses about summer, fire, and goats doing strange things on hillsides. One of them involves a dancing turnip. No one remembers why. It doesn't matter. The rhythm carries you forward. Your breath puffs like smoke in the night air. Your hands are numb, but your heart feels something close to joy. And then comes the best part, the meat pies. Glorious, golden, questionably sourced meat pies. Your neighbour has been baking since dawn. Her cottage smells like heaven, if heaven were made of spiced lard and ambition. She hands you a steaming slice wrapped in cloth. You bite in, and it's everything, crispy, greasy, salty, and mysterious. Could be pork, could be goose, could be turnip pretending to be pork, doesn't matter. It's hot, it's filling, and it doesn't taste like cabbage water. Tonight, the village eats well. Every household contributes something. Bread, ale, root vegetables, a jar of pickled fish no one really touches, but everyone nods politely at. The tables sag under the weight of effort. It's not abundance by modern standards, but it's abundance of spirit. And in winter, that's the richest feast there is. There's dancing too. Yes, you dance. Sort of. You stomp in rhythm and wave your arms while trying not to fall over on the icy path. A fiddler plays something quick and chaotic. Couples spin and slip and laugh. Cloaks flying, cheeks flushed. Your aunt pulls you into a circle and demands you show the young ones how it's done, which is confusing since you are one of the young ones. You do your best. You think your feet are moving in time with the music. You hope no one's watching. They are. It's fine. Historians still argue over how widespread and organised medieval winter festivals were. Some claim they were remnants of pagan rites, repackaged with saints and seasonal saints' days. Others say they were simply organic eruptions of communal joy. Any excuse to gather, to sing, to pretend the frost wasn't winning. Based on tonight's mess of fire, food and dancing, you're inclined to believe the latter. A fringe tradition, you remember. In one nearby hamlet, villagers used to toss old shoes into the fire as a symbolic goodbye to the year's hardships. You try to suggest it, but your brother refuses to part with his only pair, and someone else already tried to burn their sock earlier this week, for warmth, so you drop it. Later in the evening, a storyteller stands by the largest fire and begins reciting tales. Some are old, about sun gods and ice spirits, and heroic farmers who trick winter into leaving early. Others are new, like the story about a rooster who went to war with a baker and lost everything but his beak. You laugh until your ribs ache. You sit with your family around a shared log, sipping the dregs of warm ale and chewing the last of the pie. You watch the sparks dance up into the black sky. For a moment, the stars seem close. Closer than the cold, closer than the wind. You exhale slowly. Your nose runs. You wipe it with your sleeve, but your face is smiling, genuinely smiling. Back home, hours later, you crawl under your blanket full of smoke and crumbs and joy. Your feet are frozen, your fingers sticky, but your heart is lighter. And as the wind rattles the shutters, you think to yourself, winter's still winning. But tonight you danced. The festival glow is fading now, its warmth clinging like a dream that doesn't want to be forgotten. But outside the cottage walls, something else waits. You hear it first, just a low sound in the distance. Not wind, not the groan of snow-laden trees. Something sharper, a howl. You freeze, not the kind of dramatic freeze where the music cuts out and everyone gasps. No, this is a quiet, creeping tension where your muscles go still because they remember. Because you know what's out there. Wolves. They live at the edge of the forest mostly, far enough to forget about during the harvest months. But in winter, when hunger claws at their bellies and prey gets scarce, they come closer. Bold, quiet, patient. You've heard stories, everyone has. Someone stirs the fire, someone else starts humming nervously. The little ones in the house look toward the door, the shutter, then to the adults. You all pretend it's nothing, just the wind, maybe a fox, but you all know better. Your father stands and walks slowly to the door. He wedges an extra log against it, then turns to you. Check the pen. You nod, grab your cloak and head outside. It's freezing, the kind of cold that gnaws at your joints and makes you wonder if your ears will survive the night. You crunch through the snow, past the edge of the cottage, heart pounding in your ears. You're not alone, you tell yourself. The village is close. The torches are still glowing faintly from last night's celebration. You're not alone. But still, every shadow looks a little deeper now. Every tree creaks a little too much. Every bush seems to twitch. The animal pen is still intact. The goats are huddled together, eyes wide. The cow is snorting softly. You double-check the latch and press your forehead against her warm flank for just a moment, letting the fear drain into the hay beneath you. Then you hear it again, closer this time. A howl. Not long, not dramatic. Just a short, sharp call that cuts the air in two. You hurry back inside, latch the door, and tell your father everything's secure. He nods. Still, we'll take turns tonight. You volunteer for the second shift. You know you won't sleep anyway. Wolves were not a fantasy in medieval winters. They were real, ever-present threats. Not every night, not every year. But enough. Especially during harsh seasons. Travellers went missing. Livestock disappeared. Once, an entire family didn't return from their forest cabin. No one found them, just tracks, deep ones, and blood. There's a fringe tale, of course, there always is, that in some villages, wolves could understand human speech, that if you left out offerings, meat, bones, fat, they'd leave you alone. You once saw an old man pour broth into a wooden bowl and whisper to the forest. You laughed back then. Tonight, you're not laughing. Historians still argue how common wolf attacks really were. Some say fear exaggerated the threat. Others point to records, scars on bones, legends rooted in fact. You don't need a book to tell you what fear feels like. You hear it in your family's silence. You feel it in how your uncle keeps the poker close to his side. Your turn comes in the middle of the night. You bundle up, sit by the door, and listen. It's the longest hour of your life. Nothing happens. The fire crackles. The shutters rattle. Once a branch falls from the roof and you nearly scream. But still, no wolves. Just the pressure of knowing they're close. Knowing they're watching, waiting. You think about the torches, the warmth, the dancing. You think about how quickly joy can turn to fear. You think about how thin the walls are. How thin everything is, really. Safety, luck, life itself. And yet the wolves do not come. Eventually your father relieves you. You crawl back to your bed, legs stiff, heart still tight. You lie awake a while, staring at the rafters. The fear lingers like smoke. But the house is still. Your family breathes around you. The pig snores. You survived another night. And in winter, that's something. You wake up and it's colder than usual, which says a lot. You shuffle to the window and rub away the frost with your sleeve. What you see outside makes your heart sink a little, then a lot. The river is frozen, completely. It's not just a crust of ice around the edges like usual. This time it's a solid sheet. No gentle flow, no glistening currents, just white silence stretching across the valley like a sealed wound. Your brother steps up beside you. "It's happened," he mutters. You both know what that means. You've heard the stories. This isn't just a cold day. This is the coldest year in memory. The kind old people warned you about with a grim shake of the head and a muttered prayer to St. Blaise, patron of throats and apparently really stubborn winters. You've had hard winters before, snow, sure, frost, yes, but this is something else entirely, the kind of cold that cracks wood, freezes your breath mid-air and turns your boots into ice traps by lunchtime. Your cousin tried to wash her face this morning. The water in the basin cracked her soap. The fields are useless. Even the root cellar, dug deep into the earth, has gone crusty at the corners. Potatoes are rock solid. Onions are frozen into little fist-sized bricks of spite. And then there's the wind. It doesn't howl anymore. It screams. It tears through the gaps in your cottage walls with sharp fingers and no mercy. Even the fire seems scared, shrinking into the back of the hearth like it's trying to hide. You pile on every layer you have. 2 tunics, 3 cloaks, a hat made from repurposed sock fabric, and boots lined with yesterday's newspaper, if you had any. You don't. So, moss it is. When you step outside, it's like walking into a glass jar. Everything looks frozen in time. Icicles hang from rooftops like the teeth of some enormous beast. The snow doesn't crunch anymore. It shatters under your feet. You pass a well and see the bucket rope snapped in half, frozen stiff like a wooden rod. Even the goats seem quieter, clustered together like woolly statues. You head to the river, not because you want to, but because everyone does. It's a kind of ritual now, a moment of shared disbelief. People are already gathering on the bank, wrapped in layers and stunned into silence. The surface glistens, smooth and pale, like the belly of some dead beast. A boy tests it with a stick. Nothing happens. Another tosses a rock. It bounces. "Frozen all the way through," someone whispers. A few brave kids step onto it, skidding and laughing until their parents drag them back. No one's taking chances, not this year. This year, the year when food ran low too early, when the frost came weeks ahead of schedule, when the snow buried fences and rooftops sagged like old shoulders, the year when you watched your neighbour butcher the last of his chickens just to stretch one more stew across 3 more days. Historians still argue what caused the worst winters of the medieval period. Volcanic activity, shifts in the North Atlantic Oscillation, a string of unlucky harvests. Some even blame it on supernatural causes, divine punishment or celestial alignments. But for you, the reason doesn't matter. What matters is getting through it. A fringe tradition from a Highland village comes to mind. When the river froze over, families would carve symbols into the ice with sticks. Prayers, mostly. Little drawings of sunbursts, wheat stalks, saints with blazing hands. You remember your mother telling you that if you whispered your hope while you carved, the river would carry it to spring. You find a stick. You kneel by the edge. Your hands are stiff, but you carve anyway. A crude sun, a curling vine, the shape of a loaf of bread. You whisper nothing, but your heart feels loud. That night the cold gets even worse. The windows frost over before dusk. The stew doesn't simmer, it congeals. Your breath hangs in the room like cobwebs. You sleep in shifts because someone has to keep feeding the fire. You dream of warmth, not blazing heat, just the feeling of a warm stone against your palms. You wake up craving that dream like soup, and still, you endure. Because everyone does. No one talks about giving up. It's just one more log, one more patch in the wall, one more spoonful of soup with more broth than substance. You do it for each other, because that's what people do in the coldest year. You survive it together, or not at all. The wind has been howling for days now, not whistling, not gusting. Howling like something alive and angry, clawing at the corners of the world. Your ears have learned to filter it out, the way you eventually stop hearing a dripping faucet, or your cousin's nose whistling in his sleep. But the cold still gets in. Always. Tonight, You sit by the fire with a blanket wrapped over your head like a medieval burrito, staring at the flames and thinking about your grandmother. She used to say, "Cold teaches better than books," and she was right. Cold teaches you how to move, how to wait, how to notice every draft and every creak in the rafters. But it also teaches something softer, something about memory, about stories, about the things we pass down when everything else is frozen. Because in this house, the cold isn't the only thing handed down. There are songs for starters, old ones, with strange words and older meanings. Songs you sing not for entertainment, but for warmth. The rhythm makes the work lighter. The melody fills the cracks in your courage. Then there are the superstitions, a swirling pot of half-remembered folk wisdom and desperate practicality. Never sweep ashes at night, or you'll sweep out your luck. Hang dried herbs by the door to confuse spirits. Sleep with a spoon under your pillow if you want to dream of spring. You've tried that one. All it did was poke you in the ear. But the most powerful thing passed down in your family isn't a charm or a song. It's knowledge. Practical, useful things. Like how to stuff moss between window slats without letting in bugs. How to boil pine needles into a tea that doesn't taste terrible and might keep your teeth in your head. How to mend a tunic sleeve using horsehair when thread runs out. These little lessons come quietly, while peeling turnips, while stirring porridge, while shivering by the hearth. Your father taught you how to check the barn door for wolf tracks without stepping outside. Your mother showed you how to test the thatch for rot using just your fingertips and a bit of spit. Your great-aunt swore you could tell how many snowfalls remained by counting the frost rings on the inside of the water bucket. Historians still argue how much of peasant knowledge was passed orally versus ritually. Some point to folk traditions as encoded survival guides. Others think it was mostly trial and error, repeated until it stuck. But inside your home, it's obvious. Learning is done through hands and voices, through long evenings and short winters, through memory that's worn like wool. There's a story your uncle tells every year around this time. He never introduces it. He just starts telling it, the way you might start stirring a pot that's always simmering. It's about the worst winter anyone can remember, the year the church roof collapsed and the mill froze so hard it didn't thaw until midsummer. People starved. Livestock died. One family, he says, made soup from boiled bark and survived. Another used their dead fence post for firewood. A third built a sleeping pit under their floorboards and lived in it until spring. You can outlast anything, he always says at the end. If you know how, and if you don't forget. That last bit stays with you. Don't forget. So you don't. You pay attention when someone shows you how to seal a cloak with a bone pin. You listen closely when someone mentions the shape of smoke that means snow is coming. You watch how your father cuts wood in a spiral so it burns slower. You remember. Because someday, you'll need to teach someone else. There's a fringe belief from the forest villages that memories carried through winter become part of the house itself. That the walls remember the warmth, the laughter, the warnings, the fear. That when the house creaks, it's whispering back what it's been taught. You like that. You look around now and try to imagine what your cottage has learned. How many winters it has stood through. How many stories it's heard. It's still here, so are you. Outside, the snow has started again. Not heavy, just a soft curtain falling like a sigh. The fire crackles. Someone hums one of those old songs off-key but gentle. You lie back on your straw mattress, blanket up to your ears, and think about all the things you've been taught, the things you'll keep, the things you'll pass down when it's your turn to teach someone how to survive the coldest nights. Not just how to stay warm, but how to stay human. The wind is quiet tonight. Not gone, just resting. The kind of stillness that only arrives after weeks of battering storms, as if the cold itself is pausing to catch its breath. The snow outside sits heavy and undisturbed, blanketing the village in soft curves and silence. Even the shutters, usually clattering and grumbling in their hinges, have gone still. And in that stillness, something else finally arrives. The first whisper of spring. You don't see it. Not yet. But you feel it. In the way the cold doesn't cut quite as sharply. In the way the fire seems to burn longer. In how your breath, when you exhale near the window, doesn't frost the glass quite so aggressively. It's subtle. A shift so small you'd miss it if you weren't listening. But you are. Everyone is. Today, someone found the first drip of thaw along the roofline. Just a single fat drop of water, sliding down like it had somewhere better to be. And that was enough. Enough to make someone smile. Enough to start a rumour. Spring is near. The adults don't say it out loud. That would jinx it. But they look out the window with less dread now. They stir the stew with a little more humming. And when the rooster crows in the morning, yes, him again, it somehow sounds less obnoxious and more like a welcome reminder that you've survived one more day. You've stopped counting how many. Tonight the fire is strong. The walls don't groan as much. Someone's roasted the last carrot and mixed it with a chunk of old salt pork. It smells incredible, like hope disguised as dinner. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, knowing that the last scraps of the winter store are dwindling, but also knowing that soon you'll see green again. There's a kind of quiet reverence in the room, not silence, just calm. Your family has stopped bracing. They still shiver, still wear 3 layers to bed, still chase away drafts with rags and curses. But they're not shrinking from the season anymore. They're facing the end of it. You lie in your straw bed, blankets pulled high, and stare at the ceiling. You listen for the fire's rhythm. You let your breath match it, slow, deep, soft. The pig is snoring. The goat's not indoors tonight. You hear her just outside, stomping in her little lean-to, braver now. Or maybe she smells the thaw too. You think of the river. Still frozen, maybe. But you picture it melting. You picture the ice breaking open like a yawn, water stretching, moving, flowing. You imagine birds returning, grass pushing through frozen soil, the first green shoot daring to emerge. It's almost unbearable how much you want to see it. There's a fringe tradition you remember, a small one. On the first day someone hears the river crack, they're supposed to place a stone by the door and whisper thanks to the frost, not because they loved it, but because they lived through it, a nod to the enemy that didn't win. You'll do that. You'll thank the cold. Then you'll light a fire just because you want to, not because you need to. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants marked the end of winter with rituals, or whether the relief was just too deep to bother with ceremony. Some suggest elaborate feasts. Others believe it was nothing more than the first day someone went outside barefoot and didn't scream. Either way, you know exactly what that moment feels like. Impossible joy. You close your eyes. The cold is still here, but it's quieter now. Tamer. Like it knows its time is ending. Your body relaxes. Your hands, always curled against the chill, unclench. Your face softens. You feel the warmth of the fire on your legs, the press of your blanket on your shoulders, the slow weight of sleep pulling you under. And somewhere beyond the frost-rimmed windows, the world is shifting. Gently, carefully, like it knows you're listening. Spring is coming. You made it. The fire crackles faintly now, its embers low, glowing with the steady, sleepy heart of a long night almost over. The house has gone quiet. Just the rhythmic breath of those you've endured the season with, their outlines dim in the candle's dying light. You shift slightly in your straw bed. The blanket's heavy, familiar, wrapped around you like a slow exhale. The wind outside has softened to a whisper, brushing the shutters like a hand across fabric, gentle and worn. It doesn't rattle them now, it hums. Your thoughts begin to slow, unspooling like the last thread on a spindle. You picture the snow smooth and untouched under the moonlight. You picture the river still slumbering beneath its ice coat. You picture the path through the village, narrow and winding, waiting for footsteps to return with the thaw. Everything is waiting, and so are you, not with urgency, not with worry, but with the quiet patience of someone who has learned the rhythm of winter, who knows that even the coldest season has its limits, that every frost has its end, that warmth returns, not all at once, but steadily, like breath rising from a sleeping chest. You're safe. You are warm enough. You are surrounded by old wood, old stories, and the soft, slow promise of spring. Let your body sink now. Let your breath ease. Let the darkness fill with dreams of sunlight and soil and the scent of new grass. The night is long, yes, but you've outlasted longer. Sleep deeply, traveller. You've made it through the coldest nights. 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 you